Hey everyone, today we'll be taking a look at Forza Horizon 5. I've talked in other videos about how over the past year I have rediscovered racing games and have come to really enjoy them. The Crew 2 and then various Need for Speed games are what got me hooked, so as I was looking for other similar games, the Forza Horizon series kept coming up. So I decided to try out 4, and I'm glad I did because it gives me a basis of comparison for 5, and also because it was just a lot of fun. As always, if you enjoyed the review, be sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing, both of which really help out the channel. With that said, let's get into it. While I did play some of Forza Horizon 4, there was so much content that I was unable to finish it all before 5 came out, so I am still somewhat of a newcomer to the series. And that trend continues as there is a ton of content in Horizon 5 at launch with 2 planned expansions. So much content to the point that it was almost overwhelming as I had almost too many things to do. There's multiple different types of racers, there's expeditions, multiplayer seasonal events, battle royale, and so much more. Not to mention the over 500 different cars to collect and customize, ensuring you always have something to do. But is this a question of quantity versus quality, or is it one of those rare moments in life where we get a win-win of both quality and quantity? Spoiler alert, it's the latter. I feel like I've written this line before, but since this is a live servicey type of game, it is very light on story content. Really doesn't go much deeper than you are a racer and it's your goal to kick back and have fun racing against everyone at the Horizon Festival with the hopes that you are enshrined in the Hall of Fame someday. That's not to say there is no story, there are both expeditions and driving stories that have self-contained mini-stories pertaining to the characters you meet in them. The expeditions have you pulling off insane feats like driving into a dust storm or around an active volcano which then helps you set up a Horizon location in Mexico. Don't ask me how that works. While the driving stories are mainly used so you get a chance to try out a bunch of amazing cars, they do also have some recurring characters and you will get to learn about them. While the missions themselves were generally extremely fun, more on that later, I didn't find most of the stories particularly engaging. But the story is clearly just an afterthought as the main focus is on the world and gameplay, and in both cases Forza Horizon 5 really does not disappoint. This review is going to be a little different than my others. There's simply so many things in the game that would be here for several hours if I went into fine detail about them all. So what I'm going to do is just give a basic overview and then go into the really big positives and negatives about the game. And yes, before we go any further, the game is virtually identical to Forza Horizon 4 except it's in Mexico instead of England. Everything down to the UI is absolutely the same, and again, there is a giant open world to explore filled with content. And this really isn't a huge problem, as 4 was also a great game. And while there were some minor improvements, I do think there are other areas they can focus on in future installments to continue to improve the game. Mexico looked incredible in the pre-release gameplay footage, and it absolutely lived up to those first impressions. And I mean the actual makeup of the map and how everything is laid out, because yes, of course, graphically speaking, it looks amazing. I was shocked at how well my PC with a Ryzen 5 3600 and RTX 2060 ran it, and it seems like Playground Games did some incredible work when it comes to optimization. There's a staggering amount of variety. You'll get to see volcanoes, snowy peaks, beautiful towns filled with underground tunnels, highways, mountains, beaches, and anything else you can think of. The weather effects are incredible. Driving into a tropical storm both looked amazing and it was a lot of fun drifting off the road as the rain poured down on me. This is one of the few times I've actually felt the gigantic size of the open world is justified. Almost every inch of the map is used for content, and not only that, but it also features an insanely powerful creation tool, so once you've raced every race, you can then build your own. It's just great game design when developers can properly use their giant open world as a useful gameplay mechanic instead of a barren wasteland we see in so many other open world games. There's also tons of PR stunts, things like speed traps and drift zones, the same things that are Need for Speed in the Crew 2. I have no idea who did it first, but all open world racing games seem to now have these. Which is great, as there is always something to do. You'll always be collecting points to level up and constantly being rewarded, almost to the point of sensory overload. Seriously, this is the first game I've ever seen that gave me experience points for spending skill points. There were simply so many things to do that I was overwhelmed at times, but while I would usually dislike this, the thing is in Forza Horizon 5, almost everything was so much fun I didn't mind. The main progression for the game is done through collecting accolade points, which are essentially in-game achievements. When you level up your accolade level, you are rewarded with a new Horizon Adventure chapter, and this is one of the main areas that the game shines the brightest. Sometimes you'll race a train or even a plane in ridiculous over-the-top races. I actually wish there had been more of them simply because they were so much fun. There was one where it showed jet skis, and I just assumed you'd be able to race in one. While racing against them was fun, it would have been a nice change of pace to race in a jet ski, although I imagine the developers did not want to make the game too much like the Crew 2. Personally, I would be okay with them adding in additional vehicle types to race in, but I do understand why they haven't done so. Each style of racing has its own set of adventures, the last one being an extremely long race in that category. Seriously, some of these races went for upwards of 10 to 20 minutes as they had you racing across the entirety of Mexico. The cross-country one in particular was one of the best races in the game and featured some incredible level design on the developer's part as you get to race across every type of surface. For event types, we have road, dirt, cross-country, street, and drag races. The cross-country and street races in particular seem to be particularly well designed. The street races through the tunnels of Guanajuato were incredible, requiring tight and technical turns while also having to avoid street traffic. One of the highlights of Horizon 4 for me was how well driving felt on dirt surfaces, and it's just as good in 5, if not maybe even a little improved. Somehow the developers were able to get just the right feel from the vibration in the controller to simulate the feel of driving on a dirt road. This gave those races such a great sense of immersion, and I feel like drifting worked best off-road as well. I could go on for days about the races, but simply there's plenty of variety in track design, and they are generally very well made. What I found a little more hit and miss were the stories. These events allow you to drive a variety of cars, and depending on how many points you score or how fast you finish the level in, you are awarded up to 3 stars. I felt like the balancing was really off. On many levels, it was way too easy to get 3 stars, while others were brutally difficult. There were really only a handful that I felt the difficulty was finely tuned to the point where I was properly challenged, but where it wasn't so challenging that it was frustrating. This will obviously vary from person to person, but I did find them to be generally significantly easier than the stories I did in Forza Horizon 4. That's not to say they were not still fun, as being able to race in every conceivable style of a Volkswagen Beetle from drifting to monster truck variety was certainly interesting. When it comes to the actual driving, it still feels very similar to 4, however I did notice some minor improvements. While not the best experience I've had racing with a controller, it is certainly up there. It's still in that weird place where it's not quite simulation racing, but it's not exactly arcade racing either. There's plenty of settings you can adjust to make the experience favor one way or the other, and the more difficult settings, the more bonus credits you can earn from winning races. While tuning things like traction and stability control is fairly noticeable, there's really not too much of a difference between the standard and simulation steering. Personally, I preferred the simulation, but do understand they didn't want to make the experience too different, and doing so would introduce a litany of balancing issues. The weight behind each car when turning feels perfectly tuned, and helps make racing in Horizon 5 so immersive. It's something a lot of racing games struggle with, and it's something that makes racing that much more fun for me. They also definitely slightly improve steering while cornering and general road traction. At times in Horizon 4, it felt like I was driving on a frictionless surface, and while that still does happen from time to time in 5, it is less frequent. So while the racing is very similar, we did get some marginal and very appreciated upgrades. If you are new to the series and you are used to other racing games, I did find the controls to be somewhat different than most other similar games. However, at least for me, they did eventually click, and now that I'm used to them, I am starting to enjoy them more and more. That said, I do think braking needs some minor tweaks, and certain cars need their cornering speed and traction tweaked a bit as well. But overall, it's very solid in the racing gameplay department. It's not so complicated that it will be overwhelming for new players, yet at the same time not so simple that most simulation racing fans will be turned off. Like I said earlier, there's over 500 cars to collect, and there are a ton of ways to tune each one. That said, I'm not really a big fan of how car progression is handled in the Forza series, and do think that is one area that could use some major improvements in the next title. It's functional as it is now, but while you can tweak a car in a million different ways, I feel like it's more meant for multiplayer and not the single player. Yes, certain tunings will help you win while playing against the AI, but since they scale to your car's gear score, it felt almost meaningless at times. I would like to see something more similar to Need for Speed or The Crew 2, where as you progress, you can improve your cars more and more, and races get more and more difficult as you progress through the game. But that's just me, as I do think the game is more multiplayer focused, while I prefer single player experiences. That said, there's a great selection of tunings you can do, everything from alignments to springs and differential. And one really nice touch is that each setting has a long tooltip that pops up next to it, going over in great detail about what happens when you change each setting. Changing these can be a little overwhelming if you are new to racing games, but it will help you tune your cars to how you want them to feel. And if you do not feel comfortable changing the settings yourself, you can download community-made tunings. On top of that, you can buy a variety of parts to improve your car's stats and shift it towards road or off-road racing, and even do engine swaps. Also, you can customize the look of each car however you want, although if you are like me, you'll just download a community-made vinyl. So overall, there's a great amount of customization that can be done to each car, although I would like them to add in a sense of single-player progression in future installments. There's a few more things that I wanted to mention. Houses make a return, and I don't want to spoil the surprise of some of them, but one in particular is insane. They can provide special bonuses like doubling your Forza points or giving you a daily wheel spin. Yes, the wheel spins are back, and I have mixed feelings on them. They are designed to keep you hooked on doing whatever you can to potentially win a rare car or tons of money. I might have been really unlucky, but I won way less than I did in my short time in Forza Horizon 4. Almost every roll was the worst possible thing on the board, and only once did I get a semi-rare car. Obviously, this is random and will vary from person to person, but you get so many rolls that you should eventually get something good, I imagine. XP and fast travel boards return as well, providing some more activities to do in the open world. Although there's a house you can buy that allows you to travel wherever you want, so unless you unlock every single fast travel, buying the house is the better option early on. And I get that they want people to be engaged with the open world and it helps out the multiplayer, but for people like me who are really only focused on the single player, the map is so gigantic that time spent driving everywhere does start to add up. I did spend some time in multiplayer and there is a ton to do. Again, it's not really my thing, but for people who are into it, there's everything from arcade events to battle royale. That said, I did enjoy the straight up races, but mostly did them to earn the weekly Forza points. There is still some jankiness to the online systems and it does need some fixing. The UI just kind of disappears for a minute before a match starts, and I feel like the UI could be implemented better. The only thing that really ended up disappointing me was the soundtrack. There's not enough stations, and the few that we got only played a few songs, making it feel extremely repetitive. Best to turn off the music and turn on Spotify. While I have some minor nitpicks, overall Forza Horizon 5 is an incredible game and can potentially provide hundreds, if not thousands of hours of fun. So with that said, I'm going to give Forza Horizon 5 an 8.5 out of 10, which I think might be the highest score I've ever given out. Honestly, all I could think about while typing up the script was playing more Forza Horizon 5. It's an absolute buy, or if you have Gamepass, simply download the game. If you're not subscribed to Gamepass already, I just signed up for the $1 deal, so you can try out the game, and if you like it, then I would suggest just buying it, because unless you plan on permanently subscribing to Gamepass, it does end up being cheaper in the long run just buying the game. I hate saying this, but it's Forza Horizon 4, but more, so if you enjoyed that, there's a good chance you'll enjoy 5 as well. And even if you're not into racing games, I would really recommend trying this one out. You might find a whole new genre that you enjoy. I do think they've exhausted this particular formula and would really like to see some changes in Forza Horizon 6. If they could touch up the driving mechanics and progression just a bit, 6 could end up being one of the best racing games of all time. And 5 is a very strong contender for Game of the Year, although I am working on another game right now that might challenge it. I'm going back and working on reviews for some games that I missed out on this year, so once I'm done with those, or maybe even before, I would like to make some more Forza Horizon 5 videos, and I'll probably cover any new updates to the game as well. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. The channel should be extremely close to 1,000 subs, so thank you so much to everyone for making that happen. Also, liking the video and sharing my content really helps the channel grow as well. Thanks so much for watching, see you all in the next video.